This is my little schedule for today. Since I have a little bit less time, I won't be focused so much on the biographical sketch, but all other parts will be delivered as before. The first chapter, historical performance analysis, and that is actually done in that volume Singstimmen, and you find flyers of our academic series of books outside at the desk. Dealing with opera performance in the 19th century creates a huge methodological problem. We don't have, of course, any recordings, but we do have other sources dealing with the preparation and also the reflection of the performance. Within our research on opera singing before 1900, we are working on a methodology on this premise. The idea of historical performance analysis brings together sources like theater bills, reviews, other descriptions of voices in this case, but also scores. In order to be able to approach the core fascination of opera, which is the human voice. This method is the basis for my paper today, where we'll be trying to reflect on the Italian operatic repertoire of a very famous German opera singer, Wilhelmine Schroeder-Devrient, who was active from 1820s to 1847. She created a new vocal and acting style that can be summarized with the term of dramatic soprano. Although her specialization was done through a repertoire which was very much linked to the works of composers such as Spontini, Weber, Beethoven, Meyerbeer, and Wagner, this paper argues that the influence of bel canto was very important for the further development of her singing and her style. The next small chapter, to sing opera in Germany, 1820s to 40s, I want to highlight with this the very specific German situation at that time. Actors employed at German theaters in the 19th century had to be very flexible. From an early 19th century German perspective, there was nothing more natural for an actor engaged in a theater company, whether traveling or not, than the expectation that he or she would have to do whatever was required. Very often, there was no general distinction between the speaking or the singing demands of performing in theaters at that time in Germany. Also, the training to become a singer or actor was not formalized as today. It was more of an informal process that often took place, like in our case, within the family or with private teachers as well. Furthermore, as far as specializations in the singing field are concerned, there were not yet any real distinctions being made between operatic singing in different genres. Although dichotomies and identity boundaries become increasingly important in German musical culture during the 19th century, this process only started around the 1830s and 40s with the development of the idea of specific Rollenfächer, also within different ranges for the female alto, mezzo, soprano, soprano, or characters from light to heavy. Paradoxically, the Schroeder-Devrient case exemplifies how, on the one hand, a singer had to learn a huge range of repertoire, styles, and genres, while on the other hand, specialization was clearly beginning to take shape through identity construction of certain types of female roles, and in her case also of male roles. So I skipped the biographical sketch. There will be a little bit of information on this during the other chapters as well. Just very briefly, she was born 1804, had her debut in Vienna in 1821, she has a very interesting life. That's one reason why we need to write this biography, I think, from a social but also from a gender perspective. She was divorced two times, had 4 children. So it's both. It's a woman's life of the 19th century. It's a prima donna's life in the 19th century. So it's really quite amazing. But as I said, I will be skipping that. She was engaged to the Dresden Court Theatre. That's very important also for our case in 1823. So the biography of Schroeder-Devrient, and now I'm coming to my fourth point, Repertoire, reflects on a long artistic life where Schroeder-Devrient appeared in much more than 1,000 performances. We do have a list where we have like all the performances we can track down in probably up to 100 different parts, mostly singing parts, but also acting parts, all over Germany or the German-speaking countries, as well as on the international stage of opera. We have to keep in mind, she only sang in these more than 1,000 performances, only sang the leading parts for the prima donna. The life included also an intensive theater work within the actual performances, the rehearsals, but also the preparations for these performances and rehearsals, as well as lots of exhausting trips through the whole of Europe. Schroeder-Devrient performed in spoken theater, in lighter opera with spoken dialogue, as well as in true composed opera, including extremely demanding operatic parts such as those by Spontini, Meyerbeer, Bellini, and Wagner. There's a set of roles, despite the fact that she sang so much, where she became famous of, her signature repertoire, if you want, around 10 parts. Of course, it changes within the 25 years. Oh, I should turn this off. Among them, Leonore in Fidelio, Romeo in Capuletti Montecchi, Desdemona in Rossini's Otello, Agathe in Freischütz, Emmeline in Weigels Schweizer Familie, Julia in La Vestale by Spontini, Norma and Valentine in Meyerbeer's Les Huguenots. She sang in several languages, along with German, of course. There was Italian and English, and I will be coming back to this later, although never in French. And this was also given as a reason why she was not hired at the Opera in Paris. Now I'm coming to look at her Italian repertoire. Within the German context, the question of national schools in opera is a bit confusing. The most important thing to highlight is that from a stylistic and a singing point of view as well, as also from an institutional one, there was no observable difference between German and French opera. The original French repertoire was performed in German translation. It easily fell into the category of German opera, especially at the Dresden Court Theatre, while Italian opera remained separate, especially from the perspective of stylistic matters and vocal training, which is very important. Similarly, the many critics of Schroeder-Devrient did not draw attention to stylistic differences between her singing of French or German opera, while they did in writing about her Italian repertoire, and that's a very crucial point in the reviews. There is actually one significant exception of this by Rahel von Warnhagen, and that is actually a private source. It's not a press article, but I will be coming back to that at the very end of my paper. There are three phases of her approach to Italian opera to be observed, and I want to go through these three phases. The first one includes the time of her regular training to become an opera singer. Mostly, she was taught by her mother, the famous actress and singer Sophie Schröder, and she was also trained in Vienna by two vocal teachers, by Joseph Mozzatti and Giulio Radicchi. Despite the fact that they both had Italian names, they seemed to be rooted very much in the German system. She was, at that time, prepared to sing Pamina, that was her debut in Vienna, Agathe in Freischütz, Leonore, where she did at a very young age, and the French repertoire. The Vienna critics, after her debut as Pamina, pointed out that she was extremely talented, that she had great stage charisma, but was lacking of vocal technique and flexibility in her voice. The second phase of her approach to Italian opera is yet mostly related to her engagement with the Dresden Court Theatre, which was split up into a German and an Italian department. She was engaged, of course, with the German department under Karl Maria von Weber. but also appeared at the Italian one. And that, of course, is very interesting for our case. Her first Italian part in Dresden, excluding Donna Anna in Don Giovanni, which was considered German, of course, was Rosina and Barbiere on September 5th in 1825. On January 4th in 1826, she sang Semiramide in Rossini's opera. These two parts were not of great interest for her. Rosina she only repeated once in a lifetime, and Semiramide 3 times. This is also true for some other parts she sang at this time by Donizetti, Fioravanti, and Paer. Given her training and background, it is not surprising that she did not feel comfortable with parts which included huge amounts of coloratura, which were kind of based on coloratura, if you want. The third phase, and that is the most interesting one of her reception of Italian opera, was of great importance also, and that is important for myself looking at that whole career, at her whole at her artwork, if you want, was of great importance for her whole career. It had to do very much with the beginning of her international career, or the support of her international career, and especially the influence of Paris as a place was crucial here. The 2 series of performances in Paris, first in spring 1830 and then in spring 1831, only included the German repertoire though. Agate, Leonore, Donna Anna, Rezia. But during these stays in Paris, she also became interested in Italian opera and also took lessons in Paris with teachers specialized in Italian opera. There is a review of a concert in Paris to be found where Schroeder-Devrient performed a duo italien. She performed her ornement according to her partner in that duo, Marco Bordogni, a famous tenor and teacher. And he was well known for his Rossini parts, and he actually taught Wilhelmine Schroeder-Devrient in Paris. It is significant that she started to perform 2 of her most important parts altogether after the second Paris tour. In Dresden on July 31st, 1831, she sang her first Desdemona, and on October 1st of the same year, she did her first Romeo, which was really her key signature part. Not only she had become substantially interested in Italian opera, but also through her performance in Paris, she was clearly now perceived as a specific German singer of opera, which is very interesting. The next Paris visit, and that is the third one, included mostly now also Italian repertoire. Her first Norma, actually, she sang in Dresden on February 22nd, 1835, and with these 3 parts, Desdemona, Romeo and Norma, we have the 3 most important Italian parts in her repertoire. One of the reasons that she did extend her repertoire significantly was also rooted in the fact that she wanted to compete with her colleagues on an international level, especially with Maria Malibran. And this competition was actually staged in the real sense of the word. When in London, both singers appeared in both leading roles in Othello, vice versa. Schroeder-Devrient as Othello with Malibran as Desdemona, and the other way around, Malibran as Othello with Schroeder-Devrient as Desdemona. So they really could be compared. This is actually 2 slides for the statistics, just to give you the numbers for all the Italian parts I could track down, how often she did them according to our list, which might be not completely complete, but we're still working on this, but it still gives an idea. So this is the Rossini slide. You can see Desdemona. It's the only one of significant interest. And there is Bellini with Capuletti, Montecchi, Romeo leading, and then Norma, which was also very important, which she started 4 years later also. That also has to be taken into account. And she did that, both parts, until the end of her career in the mid-1940s. Looking at the statistics, it can be said that with the exception of Romeo, Desdemona, and Norma, that these are the most important, so Romeo, Desdemona, and Norma are the most important Italian parts within the repertoire of Schroeder-Devrient. And most of these performances, that's what I said already, listed were sung after 1830. So in relationship to the whole numbers, this is even probably more important. So Fidelio, she sang 10 years longer, kind of. And I don't have the number for that anyhow here. Now maybe the most important chapter of my presentation, 1830s German divas Italian opera singing. So the question is, which I try to grasp, what was specific of her way of singing Italian opera? The discourse around national stylistic approaches to opera had been predominant with the reception of Schroeder-Devrient's art since her Vienna debut in 1821. After 1830, not only she had been to Paris a couple of times, but also to London, where she had had her debut in May 1832. After her return from abroad, she was perceived in the sense that she had brought the German vocal style to foreign countries. With our background today, it seems that the three most important parts, Desdemona, Romeo, Norma, are quite different and ask for also very different singers. But according to the theater system in the 19th century, and given the fact that Schroeder-Devrient was responsible for her own decision what part she would sing or not, we may assume that she at least was convinced that all these parts could be done by her. And the success she had with these and other parts, which was measured in terms of income and feedback by the critics and of course the audience, proved her right. I want to look at 5 aspects finally, also presenting briefly one sort to show the positioning of Schroeder-Devrient within international opera styles. And these 5 aspects are language, if we want to grasp the Italian way of singing, that's language, tempi, coloratura, contrasts, and originality. So language. Of course, that itself is the most prominent expression of culture as well as a stylistic setting, I would say. The Englishman Arthur Brooke Faulkner, who wrote a travel memoir, being used to listen to Italian opera in the original language, reflects on the language issue after he attended a performance of Don Giovanni in Germany in October 25, 1829, with Wilhelmine Schroeder-Devrient as Donna Anna as follows. I never could have believed that so much of the pleasure we receive from Italian singing depends on the language, which I think is for 1825 interesting. I heard Madame Schroeder last night in Don Giovanni, and in spite of her various excellence as a singer and actress, some of the most fascinating of her airs quite lost their charm. There was something disenchanting in the sound of Ja, mein Herr for Si, Signor, for Mi fa dar for mio padre, and right good hawked from the very bottom of her stomach for the dulcet benissime. It is not quite clear yet how often she actually would sing Italian opera in German or Italian, mostly in German, I would suggest, with the exception of Dresden, where she also appeared at the Italian department. She actually there sang the first Norma in 1835, which was received by a critic in Neue Zeitschrift für Musik with a report from February 22. As was mentioned earlier, the Dresden opera was divided in these 2 departments, and this review proves the fact that Italian opera was also sung by her in Italian in Dresden. But the German singers had their issues, he writes. Ihre Aussprache des Italienischen ermangelt der Bestimmtheit. Second criterion, second aspect, tempi. There is a tendency to be observed that the tempi in the performances of Italian opera with Schroeder-Devrient were taken rather slowly. The critic of Der Wanderer writes, Ein musikalisches Rätsel bleibt uns das Vergreifen aller Tempi, wodurch in die ohnehin klagende, melancholische Musik Bellinis noch mehr Einfärbigkeit gebracht wurde, die der Totalwirkung gewiss Abbruch getan. Ludwig Rellstab, talking about her first Desdemona in Berlin on April 18, 1831, also refers to tempi which were too slow. He writes a long piece actually on this performance, which is also interesting. And for a Norma we read in a different context, trotz des auch heute wieder merklich gedehnten Tempus riss der einfache, seelenvolle, aus dem innersten Herzen strömende Gesang, jenes zaubergleiche, hier steht's richtig, angewendete sotto voce zur ungeteiltesten Bewunderung hin und wir lernten aufs Neue die Allgewalt des Gesangs erkennen. Third aspect, coloratura and also bel canto. The fact that she took tempi quite slowly might have been related to the rather poor technical ability which was always stated to sing coloratura, which was very often criticized. Of course, it is easier to perform, just from a technical point of view, coloratura if you are able to take scales and broken chords slower. A Paris critic had stated that with her agate, and that is not a coloratura role as we know, but still, elle vocalise lourdement et avec indécision. The slow tempi in Italian opera of Schroeder-Devrient might be related to this problem in general. Der Wanderer, another newspaper in 1835, tells his readers that Schroeder-Devrient appeared for the first time as Romeo in an Italian opera, which was, at that point, as we know, not the case. But this is, of course, interesting because this article positions her as if this was the first performance in that very different style. And here it says, als Gesangskünstlerin kann Madame Schroeder-Devrient zwar nicht mit den berühmtesten Kehlen des Südens ringen, so she lost the competition to Malibran, kind of. Aber auch hier haben wir ehrenvolles Studium und talentvolles Anschmiegen an eine fremde Schule wahrgenommen. What the critic actually wrote is more than one would, and that is the next quote, would probably expect, and it is actually a praise of her bel canto ability. It seems that the lessons in Paris were of success. Ihr Triller, as he writes, ist voll eleganter Reinheit, die Koloraturblumen sind geschmackvoll und nicht überladen eingestreut, das Mezzo voce ähnlich einem bezaubernden Echo. Her Norma was named in Neue Zeitschrift Musik a queen, a dramatic singer and an actress of great capacity. And then it says, nur in der ersten Szene, also Norma, verriet sich, wie die Bravourpartie die Sängerin nicht gewachsen sei. She was criticized for, now in this text, for her intonation and her added trillos. And this last comment is also a hint that she, like many others, of course, changed the score. And that is not only true for ornaments, but also for other aspects. A critic from Der Wanderer also refers to such changes in the score, not specifying what they were. But he agrees on these changes, since in that way she does not have to present herself as a coloratura singer. That's his reason why he thinks she did a good job of Italian school, but she's able to sing the part in a German manner as a dramatic singer. Contrasts, that's the fourth aspect. In April 1834, she played and sang Desdemona in Berlin, and Rellstab, I mentioned this, who became a huge admirer of her, wrote this long piece on this performance. Here he reflects on the new Schroeder-Devrient, who was including important Italian parts in her repertoire. I quote, die Zahl unaussprechlich schöner Momente im Gesang und plastischen Spiel herauszuheben, ist fast unmöglich, doch erinnern wir an einiges. Von unnachahmlicher Wirkung war ihr Spiel bei dem ersten Zusammentreffen mit Othello und hier zunächst ihr ganzes Verhalten während des Finales von dem ersten Zusammensinken unter dem Fluch des Vaters an bis zum Schluss, wo sie mit einer erstaunenswürdigen Gewalt der Stimme eingriff. Dies ist umso mehr zu bewundern, als sie zuvor dem Duett mit Emilia die zartesten Färbungen des Ausdrucks zu geben wusste. And this reflects on her capacity to use extreme contrasts in her vocal performance. Her singing is always, especially in the view of Reltschap, viewed as part of her acting skills. The keywords of this little section are Gewalt der Stimme, also power of the voice, and zarte Färbungen, tender coloring, if you want. This was a contrast in expression trying to perform rather extreme ways of two emotions. In 1836, a Vienna critic highlights another contrast, writing about a Norma performance. He refers to her singing in bel canto style on the one hand and on her dramatic singing on the other. She is compared to other singers of Italian opera and receives, unlike them, the label of dramatische Sängerin. This refers to what we could call authenticity, at least from that German perspective. The opposition the German critic has in mind is the following: just perfect technical vocal performance, which is considered Italian, opposes to deeply convincing dramatic expression through singing. Es spricht, so das Zitat, the quote, es spricht aus dieser Stimme und aus diesem Gesang ein Etwas, das sich durch alle Ein- und Widerreden Bahn bricht. Es ist die Seele, die Empfindung, die Begeisterung, kurz die echte angestammte Künstlernatur. I'm about to finishing. This is my last aspect, which is also the end of this paper. Originality. As we all know, there was a lot of prejudice against Italian opera in Germany, and it seems that Schroeder-Devrient, by making it her own, she introduced a way of singing Italian opera which was different and, more important, more acceptable. Italian opera with the virtuoso gesture of technical ability seemed superficial. Schroeder-Devrient brought something to the parts mentioned, which is characterized by the fact that she was not a great coloratura or soprano. Instead, she added something what the German people could relate to, and which was perceived as deeper than the regular way of singing Italian opera. All parts she sang more than just a couple of times had a very specific, tragic layout. The story, the score, and can be described from her perspective as material, which Schroeder-Devrient made it her own. Most important, her Romeo, which was perceived as an original created by her. And the question of originality is also reflected in her vocal style. To support this interpretation, I want to finish this paper with a quote by Rael van Warnhagen. She loved Italian bel canto, which she described in a letter 1834 within a long section on Schroeder-Devrient. She was only in favor of one way of singing, she says. Es ist die italienische, die den besten Gebrauch der Organe lehrt und dann den besten Gebrauch des Gesangs, welcher wieder seine Grenzen in Schönheit und in dem hat, was er auszudrücken vermag, welches von Franzosen nicht erahndet, von Deutschen dünkelhaft verdreht. Schroeder-Devrient, she writes, created her own way of singing. Sie singt zuweilen beim höchsten Ausdruck in einer selbstgeschaffenen Manier und diese gerade möchte ich eine deutsche nennen. Thank you very much for your attention.